I'm Chad Roberts, and I want to welcome you to this series called We the People. Our team has created this resource because, probably like you, we are greatly concerned about the direction our country is going. We believe that there are some important voices that can lend to the conversation. As a matter of fact, rather than arguing, rather than yelling or screaming or demanding our point of view, what we want to do is we want to have conversations. We want to create great and engaging conversation. What you and I are witnessing is the dismantling of our country. What does it mean? Where is it leading? Most important, what can we do about it? As Christians, we have always enjoyed sort of a home field advantage in America. I don't think I have to tell you that has changed. So how are we to think? How are we to process what we see and what we hear going on in the country today? Most important, how are we to respond? That's what this series is about. We want to learn how to think well. We want to think correctly, and as a result, we want to respond rightly to the challenges that is facing our country. You know, what goes on in Washington, most of us feel like we're very limited in how we can change that, short possibly of our vote. As Christians, we have always enjoyed home field advantage in America. But I don't have to tell you, that has changed. What we cannot lose sight of as Christ followers is that behind every headline rages a fierce spiritual war. You and I cannot get entangled in all of the arguments, in all of the divisiveness of this day. No, you and I need to rise above all of that. We need to create civil conversation. We need to have logical debate. We need to have civil discourse. But we don't need to get entangled in the rhetoric, in the divisiveness, in the hatred that we see in today's America. No, we need to rise above it. That's what this project is about. This summer, I read one of the greatest books of the year that I've read yet, and it was called The Accidental President. It was about Harry S. Truman. I've enjoyed so much learning more about his presidency and his life. And in Truman's first address to Congress after FDR passed unexpectedly, Truman said these amazing words. He said, "What brings us together as Americans are our values." Now, fast forward to today, to the current administration, I heard our president say, "What brings us together as Americans is our love for the country." Now, I noticed a big difference there. I don't know if you've ever been to the beach and leisurely spent time in the water and allowed the water to drift you. Then all of a sudden, you look around and you're in an unfamiliar place. Nothing looks the same to you. That's a scary feeling. I think that's where we are as a country. We have drifted from our values. If we can go back and identify what our values are, then whether you're left or you're right, whether you're blue or you're red, whether you're Republican or Democrat or independent, you can appreciate, you can respect our values. The problem is, in my view, we've drifted from those values. And so now our leadership says it's our love for country. No, I think it's greater than that. I think it's back to what Truman said. It's our values. If we can rediscover that, I think it would bring us back to some common ground. That's why we've created this resource called We the People. I want you to find optimism. I want you to find hope. I want you to find God in today's America. And I think much of that depends upon our attitude and whether or not we will choose that. I hope this resource helps you in your thinking, in the confusion of today, the noise of today, the various narratives of today. Let's rise above it. Let's go back to our values. Let's look to the Lord, and let's let Him change our nation as He desires to do. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Chad Roberts, and I want to welcome you to another session of this short collection of videos called We the People. We have created this resource because we want to think well in the culture, in the climate that you and I are living in right now. I think most people would agree that in many ways we are in uncharted water. At least I know for my lifetime, I've never seen such divisiveness. We've never seen things the way they are in extreme opposites. So for ordinary people like myself, average citizens like myself and probably like you watching, how should we think? More important, how should we respond? So we have invited certain guests who we feel have a very balanced and a very healthy perspective, who can speak into the current climate that our society is right now. One of these guests is my friend Miles Burdine. Miles, thank you so much for being willing to share your thoughts with us today. I've really enjoyed getting to know you some, and I want to welcome you today.
Thank you, Chad, for the opportunity. I have been looking forward to this, so I'm glad the day is here.
Well, Miles, I've really enjoyed learning about your background, and I think one of the reasons, not only are you an important leader here in my community that I live and in this region, not only do you have an influential voice that I think really adds to what we want to do in this project of We the People, your past military experience, I think, gives you an even stronger voice. It gives you a great perspective. Will you tell us a little bit about your background and what's led you to where you are today?
Well, thank you, Chad. I'm not sure about the kind words, but I do appreciate and respect them. I've been at the Kingsport Chamber 28 years and truly enjoy coming to work every day. I get to work with the businesses in the community and to help better the lives of our citizens and to help improve the business climate for our community, our region, and in some cases our state. Mm-hmm. So I truly enjoy doing that. I'm the father of 3 daughters and the grandfather of 3 daughters. I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I also have 3 granddaughters. Mm-hmm. And I have a grandson on the way, and I'm married to Denise, and we have been for coming on 39 years.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Miles, I really have enjoyed your perspective from your military background. Will you tell us about that?
So in May of 1980, I stood in front of another Marine officer and repeated these words of the oath of enlistment. I, Miles Burdine, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office in which I'm about to enter. So help me God. And since that day, I've tried to live my life and tried to serve my country, keeping those words in mind. I think it's very important to note, before I talk about my military career, that there's a book called Wild at Heart by John Eldredge.
Yes.
And it's a faith-based book. It's an important book in my life. And in that book, there's a quote that says, all a man really wants, he may have forgotten it, may have lost focus on it, but all a man really wants is a battle to fight, a beauty to protect, and an adventure to experience. Now, the reason I say that, and the reason I open with that oath of enlistment, oath of office, is that I got to do what I wanted to do. I took that obligation, that oath of office freely, and I left behind a wife and children as I was serving my country. And so anytime someone comes and thanks me for my service, I always am quick to say, please thank my wife, please thank my children. And while I was in the reserves, please thank my employer for allowing me the opportunity to serve. I got to do what I wanted to do. Those who are serving now got to do what they wanted to do. Nobody forced them to do it. So as we thank our veterans, which is important to do that, we should also thank their families.
Wonderful point. Well, we do sincerely thank you,
Well, thank
and
you.
we thank your family as well.
Well, thank you. My military career spanned 30 years. I got a letter in 2009 saying, 2010, you will have served 30 years. You're not going to get promoted, so you're done. P.S. We'll call you back if we need you. It's worded a lot nicer than that, a lot bigger words, but that's what it said. So for 30 years, I had the distinct pleasure of serving among those who believe like I do, honorable men and women who are willing to sacrifice themselves for their country. And my personal career was spanned 30 years, as I mentioned, 1980 to 2010. And I had 4 deployments, 3 of which to a combat environment. And would I do it again? I'm often asked. Absolutely. I'd still be serving today if I was allowed to do so.
So, Miles, in recent polls, there's been some with ABC, with NBC. In recent polls right now, 85% of Americans are concerned about the direction the country is going. What are you concerned about?
First off, that's a very disturbing number, and I'm sure it's accurate. I hate that it is. I, like my father and my whole family, I've always chosen to be an optimist because we choose to be an optimist. And but there are things that disturb me greatly about the direction of this country. First off is a lack of civility, which brings divisiveness. I mean, it's okay to disagree with what I believe, but don't hate me because of that. Don't try to cause me harm because we disagree. But we're seeing more and more of that in our country. Another concern I have is social media. People not being held accountable for what they're saying on social media. Just because it's on social media does not mean that it's true, and also does not often give the opportunity to give the other side of the story, if you will. And the third thing is somewhat a lack of leadership. I've often thought about it this way. Was Saddam Hussein a leader? Was Adolf Hitler a leader? Is Vladimir Putin a leader? Yes, they were, and yes, he is. But they use their skills to lead in a way that our world does not benefit. Think about if those 3 leaders were to lead in a positive way, how much better off our world would be. So those 3 things in particular concern me. You know, I do a presentation on leadership called Scrubbing Toilets with Enthusiasm. That topic, that title gets people's attention immediately, so it usually works pretty well. But in that presentation, I talk about leadership and how I've been inspired and have been led by people who I should be leading and inspiring. But instead they turn the tables and lead and inspire me. And it's people you wouldn't necessarily think of as leaders. It's people like my daughter, my dog, 2 custodians, a Lance Corporal in the United States Marine Corps, 3rd lowest rank in the Marine Corps, an employee, people I'm supposed to be leading, but instead they led me. So my point in saying that is everybody can be a leader. Everybody is a leader. It's just a choice on what kind of leader you choose to be. But I'll further say that, you know, when I get disgruntled about where our country's headed and I get downtrodden about what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm reading, I start thinking about people's words, the things they say on social media and how it can hurt people, but how they can help people instead. But sometimes when I get so disgruntled, I'll just sit down and my therapy is I've got a book on Medal of Honor recipients. And I'll open up and read a few of those. And I feel better. And I also go back and perhaps watch a movie such as Taking Chance, which is a movie by starred Kevin Bacon. And it's about Chance Phelps, who was killed in Iraq while protecting his country. And Kevin was a Marine officer who escorted his body home, and the respect that was given to that trip, to the Marine officer and to the young Marine who was killed in combat. And it makes you feel better about our country because of the way they're respected and the way they're treated. So that's my therapy.
Well, I like that you have go-tos that, we live, as you know, we live in a climate right now that narratives are being pushed and it's constant, right? And whether it's media or whether it's, from social media to just the news, we're always being led down these narratives, and it can be overwhelming at times. And what I got out of what you said is that you look for opportunities for optimism. Do you think, what would you say to someone who they've just disengaged? Their feelings is, I can't change anything. Everything's just, what can I do? What would you say to them to help find optimism?
Well, first off, I'd say it's not true. There is something that they can do, and that's to be positive. That's to engage back in the community. That's to be enthusiastic, and that's to be supportive, and that's to go help others. My dad taught me years ago. He said, "Son, if you're having a bad day, go do something good for somebody. You'll feel better. And if you really want to feel better about your day, don't let them know you did it."
Oh, that's great.
So there's a lot of validity to that.
That's right. When you say things like that, I tell you what immediately came to my mind. A quote by President Eisenhower. Perhaps you're familiar with this quote. He said, "America is not good because it's great. America is great because it's good." Do you think if we got back to that optimism, the kindness, the loving one another, the being kind to your neighbor, what difference would that make in today's climate?
Well, it'd make a huge difference. Make a huge difference. I mean, I look at our community, Kingsport. We are so fortunate here. The spirit of Kingsport is alive and well. And the things that are accomplished in Kingsport, nobody cares who gets the credit. They just want good things to happen in Kingsport. Now, having said that, I know there's some people out there who are negative. But it's incumbent upon us, those who are positive, you, me, others, to pull them along, to show them that there are good things happening in our community, that there are good people in our community. And there's a lot more good people than there are those who are negative.
I fully agree with that. And that's why people are flocking here from everywhere.
Yes. 80 to 100 families a month are moving here. We're very proud of that fact.
My wife, Sadie, as many of our listeners know, I'm completely blind. And my wife, Sadie, and I recently had a flat about almost an hour away from our house. And first flat that we've had since I've been blind. And this couple stopped to help us. And they live here in our region. Never met them, didn't know them at all. And not only did they help us, they would take no money for it whatsoever. We tried to pay them. Not only did they help us, they went back and they got tea and Sprite and other drinks for our kids. And they were just so kind. And I told them, I said, it's people just like you. That's why families are moving from everywhere to come here.
That's a wonderful story. And, I've so enjoyed getting to know you, Chad, and first got to know you through your wife, Sadie, and that's a good story. But I also want to say to you, and he's not paying me to say this, by the way. So, my favorite movie is Braveheart, and in that movie, there's a quote that I truly love: "Men don't follow titles; they follow courage." And the courage that you have shown. As you've gone through what you've gone through, and the courage that Sadie and your children have shown as you've gone through what you've gone through is truly admirable and I greatly respect it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Miles, tell me this. The America that you want your grandchildren to grow up in, what would have to change now to see that happen in their lifetime? What would you want to see change?
I'm going to go back to the three problems, the three concerns I have about the direction this country's headed. And if we could address all three of those things, I'm still not exactly sure how to address them. But I think a lot of it comes down to people's attitude toward their community, toward their state, toward their nation, and holding people accountable for their positive attitude or their negative attitude, and just continue to move forward from the bad stuff and move toward the good stuff. I know that doesn't sound especially educational, but that's the truth. I mean,
There's a world of truth in it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I tell people as I face blindness, there are many days I have to choose joy.
Yeah.
I have to choose it. I don't feel it all the time, but days that it's harder than others to get out of bed, I have to say, no, I'm going to choose joy today. And I think, I don't think our attitudes are left up to haphazard circumstances. Do you?
No, absolutely not.
It's a choice.
Well, in fact, the presentation I mentioned to you earlier about scrubbing toilets with enthusiasm also talk about there's a young kid in there with who has Down syndrome, another one who was born with many disabilities, but yet both of them are remarkable individuals that are actually giving inspirational speeches across our country. And then one of our employees' son, who has Down syndrome, inspires me every time he comes into the office. We call him the pickpocket, because once you meet him, he steals your heart. So anytime you're thinking about, man, I'm just not having a good day, man, I got a lot of obstacles in my life, I have a lot of adversity. No, I don't. Not compared to some others, not compared to Chad Roberts, who faces his adversity with a smile on his face. So I think about people like that, people like you, and I feel better about myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Miles, one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you as a guest in this project is because when you and I met in person some weeks ago, you shared with me about your last deployment, and you shared with me why the military put you in the position that they did. I felt like that gave you such a great perspective. Will you share a little bit about that with our audience?
I sure will. And actually, I thought about that story, and I will share that story here in just a minute, when there's a podcast that's going on these next few weeks that features Republican Governor Haslam and Democratic Governor Bredesen. Both very civil, very smart individuals. And the title of their podcast is You Might Be Right. The title is based on Senator Howard Baker, who once said to some of his colleagues, you know, that other fellow might be right, talking about someone on the other side of the aisle. And so it inspired me to think about one of my experiences when I had in Iraq in 2005, 2006. And where I was stationed was Ramadi, the Al-Anbar province in Iraq. And at that time, the Al-Anbar province was considered, and Ramadi and especially was considered, the most dangerous, most violent place in the world.
Wow.
So violent that even the national government would not come to support the province because they were afraid of getting killed. Well, I was recruited to go to Ramadi to head up the Civil Affairs Detachment. I didn't even know what Civil Affairs was. I was always just a dumb grunt, and I especially enjoyed being an infantry officer. But because of my background with the chamber, I was asked to come and do some chamber-type stuff, which was help build government, hold elections, hire police chiefs all over the province. So it was my duty on the daily basis to work with the governor of the Al-Anbar province, Mamoon Sami Rashid Alawani. Not only was it my job to help do those things that I mentioned, but I was also responsible for keeping the governor alive, which was not an easy task in itself. Oof. I was also responsible for teaching him about courage, about democracy. But he turned the tables on me many times. And while I was supposed to be leading and inspiring him, he did that to me. And there was one particular occasion, that story that I shared with you, and we had a hard time getting our enemies to come to the table to negotiate. They just wouldn't do it. Until we said to them at one time, we wanted to negotiate the withdrawal of the American forces from the Al-Anbar province. Well, that got their attention and got them to the table. The conversation did not start well because our initial accusation was quit shooting off roadside bombs. You're hurting Marines. They initially denied it several times until finally they did admit that they were shooting off roadside bombs, improvised explosive devices. And their explanation for that was, if we fight you in the streets, you're better fighters, you're better organized, you're stronger, and you got better weapons, and you kill us. But if we shoot off a roadside bomb, we might get lucky and hurt one of you, especially lucky and kill one of you. Most importantly, it'll be shown back home on American TV, which breaks Americans' will, which gets you out of here. Well, I didn't react the way I probably should have. I got up and turned my back and started to stomp out. And Governor Moon followed me out the door. And he said, "Colonel Burdine, where are you going?" I said, "Well, we're going to go settle this the way we've been settling. If they want to continue to fight, we'll continue to fight, and we'll continue to kill them." And he says, "If you leave right now, you will accomplish nothing." He said, "They understand your words, they understand your tongue, but they don't, they understand your sword, but they don't understand your words. They don't understand your tongue. So come back and talk." And then he put his finger in my face and he said, "You know what? You might be wrong." That got my attention.
Wow.
So I went down, we sat back down around the table, and Governor Moon was right. I was wrong. I needed to hear what these gentlemen had to say, former Iraqi Army officers. They stated their case. We certainly did not solve all of our differences, but we did solve some, and we saw some progress thereafter. So there are the three very important lessons I learned from that particular episode. One, I started to enter every meeting that I encountered when there was going to be a difference of opinion, and I still to this day enter that opinion with, "I might be wrong."
Wow.
And I also learned that about hope, because when I left that meeting later on that evening, I sat there and I thought, if I had no hope, if I had no job, if there were no ways of me feeding my family, and somebody said, "Here's $100, go shoot off a roadside bomb to feed your family," would you do it? I'd like to think I wouldn't, but I think it's very possible that I would. Lack of hope, lack of education. I now tell our teachers, now you're not just in teaching business, you're in the hope-giving business, because if somebody doesn't have a skill, somebody doesn't have an opportunity for education, then they probably don't have much of a chance to succeed. But the biggest thing I learned from that was civility, sitting and talking. If men who wanted to kill each other were willing to sit and talk about their differences and perhaps come up with a solution to their and compromise to their differences, then why can't we, average American citizens, do the same?
Fantastic point. Wow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for sharing that. Miles, I think your voice is so important, and I think you are able to articulate how we, at least how I feel. Maybe I don't know how to quite say it, and I think you've just captured it in a wonderful way. Thank you for taking your time to share with us. Let me ask you one last question.
Okay.
If you weren't doing the job you are right now, which I think you're doing an amazing job, what would be your dream job?
That's an easy answer, but first let me say, my dream job is what I'm doing.
Love it.
But the second part of that answer is, the easy part of it is, I'd be still serving as a United States Marine. I loved it, and I miss it.
Fantastic. Miles, I've so enjoyed getting to know you better, my friend. I thank you. I'm thankful that you are helping lead our community. Thank you for your perspective today.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I hope that you have enjoyed the discussion today with Miles Burdine. If you want to learn more about the resources that we create, I want to encourage you to go to my website, awakenedtograce.com. You can also download my free mobile app wherever you get your favorite apps. When you download Awaken to Grace to your device, literally hundreds upon hundreds of resources, just like what you've watched today, is right at your fingertips, and it's all free. Join our community today. Learn about Awaken to Grace. Connect with us so that you can continue to grow and learn along with us. I hope you've enjoyed this series, We the People.